Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dylan, I'm your host. And today, guys, we have Michael Wesa joining us. Michael Wesa is a seasoned leader with over 20 years of experience in the construction industry. His story is going to be awesome, and we'll get into it today. But the big thing that I think you're known for, we could say, is spearheading the growth of MKD Electric, a leading national industrial electrical contractor founded in Illinois. And he helped to drive the company's growth and expansion from $10 million to $150 million in revenue before a successful exit. Throughout his career at MKD, Michael gained hands-on experience through various roles, including Apprentice Electrician, Operations Manager, Business Development Manager, CFO, Vice President, ultimately President. During his time at MKD, Michael identified a need for specialized high-touch service provider in construction staffing and recruiting. As probably most of you guys deal with, is staffing and recruiting is probably one of your biggest challenges in getting people, whether that's on the engineering side or especially in the field. This insight led him to establish Leapros, full-service national staffing and recruiting agency. Following his exit from MKD, he now serves as the CEO of Leapros, guiding its growth and operations. So without further ado, because you got a bunch of, I'll just say this. Michael holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Management from DePaul University and MBA from Northern Illinois University, combining practical experience with a strong entrepreneurial spirit to drive successful business outcomes. Michael's also been a member of ABC for many years, and you helped us get into ABC, so I appreciate that. And without further ado, Michael Wesa.
Appreciate that, Dylan, and that's a mouthful. But it's been a fun journey. I've been very blessed to really kind of grow up, in business and in the construction business in general. And so I've got to do, witness, learn, and do a lot. And it's been a fun journey.
I so I didn't like grow up in construction personally, right? My background is farm kid, right? Grew up on farm doing 4-H, all that kind of fun stuff. So not construction, but again, not maybe the easiest of lives growing up. But what was it like for you kind of to grow up in construction? Because I mean, it's a family business, right?
Yeah.
For you, granted, you joined kind of once they were up and on their feet. But what was it like to kind of grow up within, this dad being an electrical contractor?
Yeah. I mean, one, it was just an incredible opportunity. And when I started, I was really young. I was picking up garbage and cleaning out vans probably at about 6. And then did that for a while, and probably till about 13 is when I would say I got more involved. I was trying to pay for my aspiring motocross career and pay for these dirt bikes and whatnot. But I kind of learned to love the business because of that. And so for me, what was it like? I learned to appreciate all the people, and I kind of gained a family, working alongside people, and who's this young kid sweeping the shop or this and that. But I learned a lot of just about people in business in general. I mean, I don't know how many job walks I went on as a young kid, or met our customers, or some contractors that we worked with, and had countless lunches where I just sat there and ate my chicken tenders and, Diet Coke. But I got to listen and learn a lot. So I would say, the people and the relationships are probably the biggest thing that I gained and was able to learn a lot from by just being in the room. And so very blessed to have the ability to do that at a very, young age, and was able to kind of take that and do a few things with it. So.
For me in my career, it's been somewhat similar. I graduated college at a young age, graduated at 20, went right to work for a company I've been doing internships for, and got my license, my PE as soon as I could, right? Like took my tests as soon as I could, passed them, got into Basically got simultaneous MBAs and my PE. So that got me into management roles. And, I was leading projects very early in my career, respectively, for going and working in firms.
Yeah.
Um, and that got me into a lot of rooms and just hearing people how they talk and the credentials that I had, again, to just have a seat at the table and lead teams, and people with that credential kind of just gave me a bunch of projects to manage
Yeah.
over time. And I was willing to take on the responsibility. But in your growth and development, how important was just hearing how people talk, hearing the relationships that are formed over lunches, or
Yeah.
on the golf course or wherever it might be. But how kind of formative was that for your development, or and still do you do that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's the MBA without the MBA. You can learn both good and bad, and you gotta learning how to distinguish between the two. But we had the opportunity to really sit with some folks. We were still young in our journey as a company, but folks who had built several $100 million companies, and hearing the lessons learned, from some of those folks, and how to think through things a little bit differently. The old adage is, kind of who you surround yourself with, and I still very wholeheartedly believe in that. And we were able to pick up a lot of things from being in the room, and made some great relationships because of that. And the key is to then do something with it, right? And whether that's personally, professionally, what have you. But and and also to kind of give back, right? And to not make it a one way street. I think it's sometimes that's a trap to kind of get stuck into. But learned so much. Learned how to think about growing the business. Learned about some of the challenges that come along with that, and how to respond to some of that. Understanding why certain businesses never get above a certain size was probably one of the biggest lessons I witnessed from a young age, and saw many companies just kind of get to a spot and kind of never get beyond that. And yeah, just kind of countless little lessons at a lot of lunches or coffees or events. So yeah, I still do a lot of that today. My different business now, but we try to get involved, whether it's associations or regular meeting with our clients, and building a tight relationship with those guys, or peers or adjacent peers. You learn so much by other people, where they've succeeded, and where they've failed, and try to take the best nuggets from that as much as possible.
Two things that I want to kind of circle back on.
Yep.
One is going to be associations. I
Sure.
think in again, being on the design side, right, and having worked in architecture and engineering firms my entire career, and now starting our own, is there were so few industry things that I think we
Mhm.
went to on
Yeah.
the engineering side, especially. I mean, AIA was, for all the architects, and they had some involvement in it, and that's some industry peers. Um, and I feel the engineering and the design side of the table is just so closed off.
Hmm.
Nobody wants to talk to each other. And now being more focused on the contractor side and helping contractors, and being a part of really more of the construction team, I would say, even though I am still engineering and designing stuff,
Yeah.
it's really, hey, we're part of construction, we're part of making this thing work, we're doing coordination and all the things that you would do. And the construction team was just ultimately responsible for that. We're taking more of a kind of lead role in that coordination piece of making sure that, hey, everything's good to go, and being really a part of that construction process. So now, in joining some associations, I feel on the construction side are really more inclusive,
Mhm.
but wanting to help than anything I've experienced on the design side. But how important have kind of associations been for you throughout your career, both even at MKD and then
Oh
now
yeah.
with Leapros?
Yeah. I would say they were very instrumental. You know, we and the MKD business really made some strong connections with some peers in different trades and whatnot. And you're able to learn from each other, but also network and you kind of develop business friendships, and sometimes those become real big parts of your life and big friendships. But what ended up happening was we developed these great relationships, and we would jointly go in on projects together and would feed each other work, and you kind of look out for each other, right? And so it created this little business development engine, if you will. And then it was also just this incubator of learning, right? Because you weren't the only one going through, crud, I've got 50 employees now. I probably should write a handbook, or I kind of need to really get serious about safety. And how are you doing that, right? And so you have another group of people to bounce some of this stuff off of. And we were fortunate. We had some folks that we met along the way that had done real well, built big businesses, and we were able to kind of learn from them what worked, what didn't. And uh, um, but that kind of networking that you're able to do in those types of associations are really important and can really lead to some great things. And then you can kind of add to that and give back. So I think we did well at that. And that early on, when we really didn't have a business development team, it was a real good way to just kind of organically word of mouth, or word of a few mouths to build the business. And it worked well, for a long time. So we do it now. Similar to your business, there are some like staffing industry associations, and that's more for insight into that industry more broadly. So I think, when I think about associations, what's the purpose? And there's kind of a couple different buckets, and some of that's more informational, things that I could bring to tweak, to add, to be on the lookout for maybe my business or the industry. And then there might be associations that are more business development, relationship focused, and everyone has different purposes. So you can take a lot from both, and we tend to do that, where we're part of some staffing things, and then we're a part of some more client specific things to get our brand out there, and to support the relationships that we're doing. And that works well. And you kind of take it from there to the next level.
Circling back a little bit too on and you've kind of mentioned it a few times through like the associations and people you met that had big businesses
Mhm.
and were doing awesome things, and then others that maybe they again grew a substantial sized business, right, in the tens of millions, maybe even 100, but kind of peaked out, right?
Yep.
What were some of the things that I guess plateaued their growth, or uh,
Yeah.
was it just success, or what kind of plateaued them at whatever level they might have been at?
Yeah, great question. So I think in my experience, I've seen um, some businesses kind of plateau, and I would say, let's call that 10 million top line revenue, uh, from 1 to 10, right? In this, somewhere in this bucket, that range. And that's, I think the average business, gets to about 3 million. And you hear, Grant Cardone and those folks kind of talk about that, right? And where there's a kind of a hard ceiling. So similar range. In where you see and why you see that, and why I've seen that, is those businesses, there's kind of a decision that has to get made at that point in order to kind of get to the next level of size, you got to ask yourself, do I want to do that? Is there a reason? Can I profitably do that? Right. But let's say there is. What I've seen is some business owners just don't necessarily have a plan. They came from the tools, and they're enjoying what they're doing. They're at a comfortable size where the business is doing well, and we've just seen folks say, you know what, I want to kind of keep it right here, and I can appreciate that, because there's lots of challenges when you get much bigger, but at the same time, there's lots of challenges, staying too small. So, but I think I've seen folks make kind of intentional choices of maintaining businesses at their size because they didn't want to make that investment. And in some cases, more rare than others, you'll see some owners that kind of operate with genius with 1,000 helpers org chart, right? So they are the critical component. They've designed their organization where everything funnels to them, and they can't see quite beyond that because they're probably very buried, that in order for the business to grow, they actually have to break apart responsibility and delegate that out in order to, kind of manage the business to a higher level. And so in a few rare instances, I've seen that. And, it's hard. There's a limit to what one person can do. And so, the real question that most business owners have to ask is, what do I want to be when I grow up, and why? Do you want to be this big mega company? And really ask yourself why. Is that just some ego thing, or is there, we've got some real tangible things we're doing well, and we just want to do that. I think if it's for the right purpose, then be as big as you want, but you got to be willing to, continue to evolve the org chart and build out the business in a way that allows you to do that. So,
And I guess with your growth, obviously, 10 to 150 million for
yeah,
the exit, there was clearly a lot of choices that your family had to make along the way. And I
yeah,
would imagine that, again, you coming in at 10 million, your dad had already made some of those decisions to
yeah.
get to that point by the time, you came into the firm. And so was that kind of his mindset all along, was to grow and make this thing a big business, or did his thinking as well as yours kind of evolve over time?
Yeah, I think I love my dad, and I think for him, when he started the business because he didn't like the way certain people were being treated, and wanted to do it differently, treat his employees differently and better, and as well as the customer. So that was the starting point for him. I think when he started, he didn't have this big number. He had 3 kids, and relatively young wife, and did something crazy that I couldn't do, and just haul off and decide, hey, I'm going to go out on my own. And so for him, I think it was, he had a skill set. He wanted to do something differently, was really sharp to recognize that he had a great opportunity to do it. And he dived in, and as he grew the business over the first couple of years, to $10 million, I think he started to get more involved in different associations and learned some of the questions to start asking himself, right? And that kind of aligned a lot with me coming into the business as well. I was helping and working in the business to some degree, loved being out in the field, and loved what I was doing, but I felt like I could see a, a bigger version of what we were, because we were doing things where our brand, our clients just absolutely loved what we were doing, and our team loved what we were doing. And we would talk about bleeding MKD blue, and like slapping a logo on your arm or whatnot. And I could just see that we could really do something with this in a meaningful way if that's what we wanted to do. Um, so we started to kind of sketch out, what that would look like. Uh, and It was quite funny. My dad said at one point, part of the journey, I was like, $30 million, kind of top line. That's probably it. And he really didn't realize. I told him, I said, well, we're going to do that this year. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And so it was kind of a funny moment for us. But we were not, we didn't want to be so boisterous with the business where we're going to just throw out a big number goal for the sake of it. It was more about, we wanted to keep growing the business because we had great team members. And if we didn't keep growing the business, those team members are going to go elsewhere. Right. And we wanted them to have a career here. And in the same token, we had great clients who were asking us to do things more and more. And so we just focused on doing those things really, really well. And it ended up being quite successful. So
I guess in some of the firms that you saw, right, in all those lunch conversations and
yeah,
being a part of the associations, is was their focus any different, and for some of them where in the way that you talk about it, right, we had a kind of an obligation to our people to
yeah,
grow, to give them careers, to also grow with your clients, right? If they were doing some great things, and clients probably, and again, correct me here if I'm wrong, but is to grow with the general contractors, to grow with the end clients, if they're
mhm,
doing more locations, bigger facilities, whatever that might be, is you had kind of probably a couple of folks that you were growing with as you grew. But for the other guys that you kind of saw plateau, did they just have, um, I mean, I know you mentioned that some of them had where they were just comfortable, they were good, they didn't want to make those decisions and grow in the team or anything like that. But was some of this, where they had a weird idea of what growth looked like or threw out a number and kind of shot themselves in the foot in some ways
yeah,
mentally around it, or um,
yeah. I would say, there's that bucket that just said, hey, we're going to maintain where we're at. You had another bucket where folks were like just afraid to take the next step. So I'd almost,
Mhm.
that's its own little thing, where maybe they had some bad experience in the past that kind of, they couldn't work their way through getting over that, and the fear of failure, if you will. Um, but I think other businesses that struggle with this, and particularly kind of coming from a couple million and above, is what I've typically seen is there's no plan. So yeah, I want to grow to X, Y, or Z. Tell me how, right? And so what I think we did a really good job at was, we decided, 0809 happened, right? Financial crisis. We did a lot of industrial work, so we were somewhat insulated from that. We dipped down 20% where some of our peers were shutting their doors, right? But it was a meaningful downturn, and so we said, hey, we don't want to experience this. We want to focus more on business development. And so what we did was we built a plan, and we looked at our customers, our existing customers, and said, here are the ones that we like, and we would love to have 3, 4, 5 more of these. And then also, here are these other industries. Here's what's going on in this industry, that industry, and we started kind of thinking more broadly about the business. And then once we said, hey, we want to focus on these 3 or 4 industries, then we could take that information and go, okay, here are all the customers in our area that are in these industries, and build a business development plan. So really what we're doing is just taking a big goal and breaking it down into smaller steps. And then you just have to execute on that, which is easier said than done. And I made 100 phone calls my first day in MKD's business development for me, and 99 of those were absolute failures, several hangups. But the last one, I closed like a $6,000 project, and I was hooked. And I absolutely love business development because we get to help people, with their problems or their challenges, and then you get to build some great relationships, along with that. So we were able to do that, and when we pointed ourselves at kind of the goal in industries, we were able to be really focused, and that focus allowed us to be intentional about our growth, and try to marry that with our capacity as close as we could, and along the way, new things presented themselves up, and we kind of assessed those industries and end markets, and went after them. But what you typically will see is somebody who may have worked for somebody else said, I'm gonna become a plumber. I'm gonna be my own plumber. And I used to do this, so now I'm gonna do that just with my own thing, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to grow beyond that, then you have to have a plan in order to do that. And so I think you see some businesses fail to have a plan. And so they just kind of stick with what they know, and what they know is limited. And they're not willing to learn and expand. The other big piece, which is very typical, is you see, in particular in the contracting space, I live in Illinois. I live in Chicago. I'm only doing work in Chicago. And so I'm only going to do this very specific thing in this very specific market. And that is obviously can be limiting. And if the market is growing and has a lot of awesome things going on, then maybe that's completely fine. But if you want to grow to a different size, you're going to have to broaden that horizon. No different than if you were Apple and said, I'm only going to sell in Connecticut. Apple is only selling phones in Connecticut. Well, Apple's not going to be the however many billion-dollar company it is today. So it's, but you have to walk before you run, and there's nothing wrong with being hyper-focused, as long as it's profitable and you can manage the risk associated with that. But for us, we had customers begging us to do work in other parts of the country. And after enough of those conversations, I said, hey, I think let's give it a go. And the operations team and myself and a few others focused on this, and then built a team that's what they focused on. And that became a big catalyst to our growth.
I think we'll cover if you come back, is to cover in another episode kind of that growth, that recruiting, because that's such a big topic, and I'm sure that's one of the key factors to your growth, right? Is that recruiting, retention, giving opportunities to folks, and that's a whole other really a podcast in of itself, if not more. I mean, clearly that's what you do for a living, so there's more than just an hour-long podcast in there. But to kind of keep on the growth trajectory of really making a decision to grow. And then I think the other big fork that I want to talk about today in this episode is really the decision to exit.
Sure.
I think that for some folks, and even this is somewhat personal for me, is and selfish, is do you just grow a big company and you take dividends and it be something that you pass on, or do you just take your exit and move on to something else? That's kind of, I think it's probably in the back of most people's minds in some way,
Sure.
shape, or form is, do I truly exit, step away, sell it? Do I, what is my exit strategy? Is it,
Mhm.
do I just take dividends for the rest of my life and it closes when I die? Do we hand it down to the kids? At
Yeah.
some point I exit and retire out that way. Um, which can be complicated too.
Yeah.
And then
Oh
you're
yeah.
still involved and, around or, asking the kids how it's going or what they're screwing up or whatever that might be in 40 years for me. But
Yeah.
for you, obviously you chose the private equity route.
Yeah.
But kind of, if you would walk through some of those, decision trees and what that looked like and why you kind of made that decision to go that route.
Yeah, would love to. And I think, one of the things, but before diving into some of that is, I think every business owner, day two of the company should be talking about when am I going to exit or how am I going to exit, even if it's something that doesn't happen for 30 years, because it's something that takes a fair amount of time, regardless of what tree branch you decide to choose. And there's things that, when you're forced to talk through that with yourself or others, it forces you to think about the business in a really productive way and help you think about how you structure things, how you systematize things that ultimately benefit the company, right? So my little PSA for spend the time for some strategic planning around that. And um, but what went into some of the decision making, um, for us, really is my dad and I, the two owners. Um, and, I was in a unique position where, we were loving what we were doing, having a lot of success, a lot of opportunity to continue to grow. Um, you've got challenges that come along the way, right? COVID, being a big part of that. And I think for us, we got to a certain size and scale, and we're doing these things. And some of the conversations that my dad and I were having, were really around, uh, how do we make sure the company is around for the next 50 to 100 years, right? How does our family, fit into that? I think asking about that, do you pass it down? My kids are super young. We really didn't have any other family members. Another component to think about is, do you do that with the management team? Can you do that? Um, at the time, we kind of hit this size for 4 or 5 years where we just started getting phone calls and started getting a lot of people talking to us about that. And so we started listening to those conversations. And at the time, we felt like, uh, if we found the right partner, this would be a way for us to potentially solidify the company in a much bigger way beyond ourselves. My dad was looking to take a more meaningful step back and kind of semi-retire. And so for us, it was just kind of balancing out what does the broader family need, and could we set this up where this is a great thing for the company in the long term. So I think once we got through the thought process around that, we were much more open, to the conversation, and that's what led us to the exit. And that was successful, and the company's doing wonderfully, today, and has really accomplished a lot of what we had hoped. And they've grown significantly. They've made a lot of acquisitions. They're doing really well. Um, would I do it again the same way? Probably not. I don't know that I would. I think there are some different things now, knowing what I know now. Um, we could have done something differently to still accomplish some of those things. And there's no wrong answer. There's just trade-offs, right? And so private equity is wonderful. Um, they have lots of capital, and this is what they do. This is their business. So for you wanting to get your chips off the table, if you will, they're a very active buyer in the space. Now, the same time, you could sell to a management team, you could do an ESOP program, or to your point, you could build the company up to a size and just have a completely different position and take a dividend. So I think if I would do it all over again, I'm probably more apt to build to a certain size and take a different role and help support the team, or some version of a complete exit. What I learned in this whole process is that I really like being an entrepreneur. I like being a founder, and private equity, and there's nothing wrong. They just operate differently than owners and founders do at times, and make subtle differences in decision making. But there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. So for me, I learned that, and I kind of had to go through that experience in order to get to that. But I like the entrepreneurial spirit that you get from being, a founder. And you don't have some of the, very heavy, kind of reporting and things that kind of come associated with bringing in a kind of a financial partner in the business. But um, so I would say those are the things that kind of went into the decision making and how I would think about just, if you were going to do that on your own, some of the things I would think about.
It kind of sounds like for folks that might want to, let's say, keep it in the family, right?
Yeah,
Like they don't necessarily, I say, care, but they don't need to take massive chips off the table, or they're not worried about a one-time, big payout
yeah,
for the company. They're okay taking dividends, right, or some form thereof over, long periods of time and just living good, right? You don't blow up
yeah,
your life with those kind of one-time big
sure,
distributions. Is for those folks, is in the big change that it sounds like that you had with private equity, is just basically more accounting, right? That they came in with their financial controls and kind of the big four accounting firm, right? Or I'm sure in some way, shape, or form, but or what were the big kind of financial controls and that you're talking about from their standpoint of coming in with that private equity mindset, right? Where they maybe rule by spreadsheet, at least with some of the developers I work with,
yeah,
they rule by
yeah.
spreadsheet. And I'm sure we've all encountered some of that over the years.
Absolutely. And so there's definitely, so the philosophy of private equity, um, I think has uh, a small flaw in it. And so if you listen to and follow a lot of private equity and their just kind of general strategy or thesis, as they will call it, is, hey, this business has gotten from X to Y. It's done real well. We're willing to pay for it, right? They can't get to Z over here. So this is what we're going to bring to the table. And they're going to bring, you know, some financial acumen or bring kind of a C-suite to the table. And I think that works in some cases, and in some cases is correct, but in some cases it's completely backwards. And where I think you see private equity struggle with is being focused on the people and assessing, developing, people planning, and then kind of how to communicate with people and developing the relationships. So just like you said, um, I think if you talk to folks who've experienced this, it's much more financial driven, and kind of by spreadsheet, if you will, in some cases. And your team has to be prepared for some of that. And um, and there's workload, associated with that, in addition to kind of the normal everyday activities. So, I think that's where, if you're exploring that path, there's a lot of great questions to ask around, what's their management style and approach, what is their thoughts on talent, and are they going to bring in a C-suite here, or how do they feel about the existing team, and things like that. And there's no wrong answer, but I think just being very clear about it, so folks who are contemplating that, they go in wide open. And private equity, most of it is done in a majority control position, right? Where you're selling a majority of the company. There are some that will invest in minority investments, but typically it's majority. So you also have to have the context of that as a seller, and they're ultimately in control. So, at the end of the day, you may have a disagreement about an approach or this or that. And ultimately they're gonna, have kind of the final say, and you have to be comfortable with that, as a business owner. So I think those are some of the things that you would see and experience. But yeah, they're going to roll in with their accounting firm. They're going to roll in with their legal team. They're going to roll in with their benefits people. They have a process that they typically will follow. And so if you're not ready for that, you're going to get kind of an immediate awakening, to some of that. And even if you were manufacturing and you're making widgets, right, the focus is going to be on the math and financials around that widget, not about the people, process, and culture necessarily. And so I think successful entrepreneurs look at all of that, not just one piece, and have built incredibly successful businesses. So again, there's a lot that they do well and bring to the table, and have had massive success. And I don't think that you can broad brush private equity one way or the other. Some do it beautifully, but I think there's a lot of data at this point of just, they bring a slightly different style, to the business.
These are, I mean, it's the right questions to ask, right?
Right.
Like, are you okay with taking a back seat now in your business?
Yeah.
Especially if you give up, or I say give up, but sell majority ownership, right? Like, now it's a very different thing, but you're still involved. You're just not in control anymore. And if you've been in
Right.
control for 20 years, let's call it, or 10, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, it's been your life. And then to have that kind of taken away it is a big change for folks, and making that deal, which I could see why you say now to go to 100% exit if you're gonna do that, and then you're just
Yeah.
completely removed from it, and um not just there, and out of control. So I see that as a very valuable thing to think through for somebody. And what are
Mhm.
you willing to do? Are you actually willing to step away, basically, and still get dividends, but not have the controlling decisions for things?
Mhm.
Um, or do you just implement a lot of the private equity pieces, and having better legal counsel and better contracts? And you do kind of the annual audits like you would from a big four accounting firm,
Mhm.
things like that. Or just, you get a better, more robust accounting team and financial team,
Mhm.
do a lot of the private equity things, but maintain the look and feel of a founder led company, or bring somebody up, from the ranks of the firm that has that culture of your company.
Yeah, and I think you can really do that after kind of seeing how the sausage gets made. Um, you know, uh, you got to back up a little bit though. One, does the company have a management team in place that you could feel comfortable doing that with, right? Do I have any type of succession, right? And that's why thinking about this early on is helpful. So for a second, let's assume that there's that there. Well, there's nothing stopping you as an individual business owner to go to the same lender that the private equity, because at the end of the day, all that private equity does is they raise money from LP investors and they take that money as essentially the down payment to go get debt. You have that down payment in your business in most cases. Why don't you just go to the same lender and say, hey, we want to have a management buyout of a portion or all of the business, and this is what we're going to do. That may work. You might not have the management team in order to do that. So that's where the crux is. You would still have some of the financial reporting and things associated with that, but you would have, and the company would have more control over what happens. Similar with the ESOP. That's more just of a structured lending thing where more employees could participate, and that operates similarly. What you typically hear is the concern from a lot of business owners, like, oh man, we're going to strap the company with a lot of debt. Like, I don't want to do that. I've been working my ass off for years to not have debt or push it down, right? Well, if you're not selling to a strategic buyer or others, in most cases, most buyers are using some form of debt or a lot of debt as much as they can. So don't fall for we're buying this all cash. Yeah, that's cash, but that cash is coming in the form of a line of credit or some sort of facility, not just raw dollars out of their investment fund. They use pieces and portions of that in order to help finance the rest of the business, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think people don't fully understand that and can sometimes make decisions by like, well, this is an all cash thing. This is great. It's better for the business. I think it's probably more of an equal playing field. It's more just about speed, level of control and things like that people have to kind of assess.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to handle debt and financing. And I think what I'm getting out of this is really a few things. One is there's so many more financial levers that most people just don't know how to pull on.
Yeah.
And if they understood those a little better, really their options would open up, right? Whether that's management buyout, ESOP, which ESOP has a lot of tax benefits too, because then it's a retirement plan. And so those portions of income is all tax free. So that's a big benefit for the business in and of itself, right? You as a owner, it's maybe not as much. So there's a lot of things with an ESOP, and I don't want to get into that here, but there's
probably its own topic. Yeah.
ESOPs they're good for the longevity of the business, and they have a lot of tax benefits and things like that. However, there's a control piece that is a little goofy in it because your employees need to have ownership within it, and so anyway, that goes there. But the thing that I think also comes out of this is that you could just take a loan against the company. If you need to take some chips off the table, is you take a loan for a portion of what the buyout would be, figure out with your bank and lenders of what that could be. And you just take some chips off the table, in proportion to what the bank would allow you to, or what you want to take out of the business, and do it as a, one-time big lump sum rather than distributions over time. And, it allows you to have some of those dollars to play with, and you do it in a somewhat tax-free manner because of the structure of the business, or you can, but that's a whole talk to your tax attorneys and accountants.
Well, yeah, I completely agree. But I mean, the short answer is yeah, absolutely. And it's the kind of push pull of just, for business owners who are kind of at that decision making time is just, what do they personally view the need is at the moment? Would they rather take a bigger chunk out, or distribute it out kind of regularly? But that's very much an option. And I don't think people fully appreciated that. It was less about that for us. So again, just kind of partly why we made some of the decisions we made at the time. But I think, if, like I said, if I were to do it all over again, which we've been very blessed, and it's done tremendously, I would think about it a little bit differently than I did at the time. And now I'm incorporating that a little bit into what we're doing here at Leapros, and just how we're thinking about that. And we don't have any big exit necessarily planned. We've got goals that we're marching towards, but we've got a great team of people and management team. And when we get to start to think about those things, we're a little more armed with a little more information than we had back then. So.
No, this is super informative. And again, just the decision making process, the things to think through for anybody that, might have this in some way, shape, or form on the horizon, and what that would look like, some
Yep.
of these key factors in growth, these key decision points, to grow, not grow. What does that look like? Why do we want to grow? What's the outcome that we're driving for? Do we
Yeah.
want to sell? How do we want to sell? What portions do we want to give up or not give up?
Yeah.
um Control, not control, do you want to sit as chairman? Or
Right.
what does that look like ultimately for
Yeah.
you as the entrepreneur and kind of leader of the business? And where do you want to be? Do you want it to be a family legacy, or do you have that in mind, or just
Right.
exit, and or the kids not want to be involved too?
Right. Right.
Is all those questions. So I think this was a really good conversation around what those decision points are for people, and for somebody that's done it, that's been there, that had a exit, went the private equity route, and again, some of the pros and cons around that for folks. But is there anything you want to add, Michael, to this episode and this conversation around kind of those growth points, equity buyouts, anything like that?
I would just say, for folks, kind of reiterate what I said. Start to think about the plan, whether it's your business development planning, or your exit planning. Um, you need to have a plan, and so there's different components to the different applications. Surrounding yourself with good people, folks you meet in your network, but also, become best friends with a great CPA, become best friends with a great attorney, and folks who've gone through and seen things, and they're going to help guide you along the way as well. And it's a fun experience building something fun. And I think if people, especially now more than ever, you need to be focused on your people and your clients and those relationships. And whether it's exiting or growing, it's the same focus. It's, again, just different application. And I think folks who do that real well, in those applications, I think are going to have a great business, and a lot of success. So just be thinking about your people, be thinking about your clients, and how we can serve them the best. So.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being here and joining us today. And guys, until next time, and hopefully we'll have Michael back to talk about recruiting and people and all those other fun things.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Dylan.